I'm a professional farrier. I've been shoeing horses for over 40 years, and mostly endurance horses. When I think of Tevis, the word that comes to my mind, tradition. And it's mostly because my family started riding this ride in the early 60s. My aunt rode the ride in 1963. My uncle rode it in 1967. I started shoeing horses professionally in 1983. A lot of farriers didn't want to shoe endurance horses. They were more focused on shoeing quarter horses or show horses. And so with my family name being involved in endurance, it was easy for me to kind of build that clientele, and working on Arabs mostly, and working on distance horses that were being trained hard. They're being used hard. And so there's a learning curve. And in the early days of shoeing horses for endurance, we were kind of stuck to steel. There was kind of a change in horseshoers where we went from basically out-of-work cowboys to becoming professionals. And that's when I think that we started learning, understanding what an endurance horse needed to be out there on the trail: angles, medial-lateral balance, and the type of shoes that we could use. And as time has gone on to present day, now we're dealing with all kinds of polyurethane shoes, all kinds of breakover shoes, and it gives the endurance rider a great option to pick the kind of shoe that works for their horse. Suggestion is to dial an endurance horse in is to communicate with your farrier, tell them what you're feeling out on the trail, and really work on building a good relationship with your horseshoer, and give your farrier an opportunity to dial that horse in. One thing I found is especially when the horse is being trained hard, and nowadays we have rides, endurance rides almost every weekend. So the horse is going out to endurance rides that sometimes you even have to switch up. You have to change in the middle of the season. You have to decide this isn't the right shoe for this horse at this time. And so be patient with your farrier, talk to him, communicate her, and communicate what is going on out there on the trail, and really work on understanding that it takes time to get that horse right for the sport. So if I have any suggestions for clients, horse owners that are trying to pick and choose what kind of shoe to use, how to manage your horse's feet. There's so many options out there now, from the polyurethane shoes, the easy care shoes, the equithotic, the sneaker, and steel shoes, and then all kinds of pads that are out there. A lot of it is going to be what you want for your horse, but then also it's going to be what works for the horse, and mostly it's going to be what works for the horse. In my opinion, I think that it's making sure that the foot is balanced and making sure that you have the right angles for that horse, and it's supported. Whether you use an easy care shoe, polyurethane shoe, sneaker, steel, that's most important. So it takes time sometimes to dial a horse in that's doing the distance riding, and it's a process. Sometimes you try a shoe and it just doesn't work for your horse. They don't travel right. Maybe it's too much pressure on their soles, and you switch over to a different shoe and you try to see if that shoe helps the horse. So I just know from shoeing endurance horses for over 40 years now that it's not just one shoe fits all horses. And you have to just kind of figure out what's going to work for that horse.
If you have Tevis aspiration, you think about it, Tevis is really the second place most endurance riders shoot for. And so you want to do Tevis, and here's the first thing is you have to have a horse. So one thing we know about endurance and one thing we've seen in Tevis is all kinds of horses are fastest ride. It doesn't have to be a purebred Arab. It doesn't have to be a race-bred Arab. It doesn't have to have bloodlines that make it fast. It just has to be a consistent horse. I'm not necessarily a person that just breaks down horses' conformation and go, that horse will never do a 100-mile ride, because I've been proven wrong so many times. I've seen horses with offset cannon bones and soft pastimes and all kinds of different conformation faults that are imperfect, towed in, towed out, you name it. And if they're managed correctly, they can do it.
I think that the most important part is that the horse wants to do it. They have the heart. If they have the heart, that's what it comes down to. You know, I personally, for the last, I don't know how many years now, at least 8 years, been riding Mustangs on 100-mile rides. And, they come in all shapes and sizes. And I don't win rides, but I finish them pretty consistently. So when you look at a horse and you think this could be that endurance horse for me, that Tevis horse for me, just go over the horse from the perspective that it's got, some decent feet, it's got somewhat correct legs, it's got a back that can pack a saddle, and start from there and see if they have the heart to do it. When I first started shoeing, we were limited to basically two types of shoes, and that was the diamond shoe and then the Izumi that was made in Japan. And that was what we carried in our trucks. Today, we have everything from the sneaker, which is a polyurethane shoe, and it's actually a shoe that I use quite a bit on my own horses, and I put a lot on. Easy Care has, the company Easy Care has come out with so many different products that have been successful in endurance. And and they're a polyurethane shoe, and they have purpose, for concussion, absorbing concussion support. You don't have to nail them on. Some are nail on, some aren't. The glues have gotten so much better now that when I glue a shoe on now, I don't worry about it like I used to worry about it when we had glues that we had to do two-part epoxies and that kind of stuff. So we have lots of options out there for hoof protection and hoof support and care. And so it's what you really want to work with and what your horse moves correctly in. If the horse is traveling good in steel and you're not having any issues with riding in a steel shoe, then I would always suggest not to make any changes. A lot of the shoes that I use, like when I use the sneaker or the polyurethane shoes, sometimes I'm thinking of the horse's conformation and how hard it hits the ground. We have these, my horse, if he's in steel, you can hear him a mile away coming because he just pounds the ground. So I know concussion is going to probably shorten his longevity. So that's why my horse Astro has sneakers on, a polyurethane shoe. It really comes down to, if it's working, you don't want to change. I'll have people that come to me and they'll want to put one particular, like a sneaker or even a easy care shoe on just for tevis. And I try my hardest to talk them out of it because they've been training all year in this shoe, whatever shoe it is they're using, steel or whatever, to not make any changes because they've been successful up to now. Why change? I mean, basically what you're doing is you're making a choice between, a steel shoe that's modified with breakover and support, or you go into the plastic shoes, which are good for concussion and some protection. But I can pad a steel shoe. This is what I do when I take on an endurance client, a new client, is I tell them um, that I may show up to shoe your horse and tell you it doesn't need to be shod yet. Or we may end up shoeing the horse at 4 weeks, where we would normally go to maybe 6 weeks. A lot of it depends on how we're setting up the ride season and how we can get the shoeing to fit in with the ride season. If the rider is planning on doing tevis, we try to go backwards from tevis and set up our schedule ahead of time. But that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to stick to it. Sometimes we stretch. Sometimes we have to do it sooner. Sometimes if they're training hard and they're training on hard ground like decomposed granite, the shoes are going to wear out a lot faster. And so, what I want my clients to know is we're constantly going to be adjusting to what's going to work to land them on tevis with healthy feet and great shoes. So it's just being able to be able to just move around and figure out how we're going to land that horse on that ride. One thing about like my business is I have a client that'll come to me and they'll say, I want to do tevis. And this is the time of year we start thinking about it. We're in February right now. And so this is the time when the ride season is starting to pick up and they're starting to figure out their ride schedule and they're starting to want to have that horse ready for tevis. Here's the thing about tevis is this year it's August 1st. And that is one day in the year that you want your horse to feel the best it's ever felt. That's the one day, and it's no different than trying to land a 747 in the Auburn airport because you're trying your hardest to have that horse's back feel the best, its feet and legs tight, its feet feeling perfect and no issues. You want that horse to be strong that day. So what I see in my clientele is they set up a ride schedule. So they'll set 50s, and maybe a 75 or a 60, and they'll have these rides every few weeks sometimes, right up to tevis. And now the way endurance is there is a ride almost every weekend that you could go to. So I ask my clients, are you going to this ride to prove your horse or to improve your horse? Because when you go to prove your horse at a 50 and you want to win the ride or maybe top 10 or ride the horse harder than you would normally ride it, you take a little something away from that horse. You start micro tears. You start just kind of pulling on those muscles and metabolically just kind of giving that horse a little bit of extra stress that it needs. And those rides that you ride up to tevis should be improving your horse, because tevis is the day you prove your horse.